Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strick and Roll. I'm your host, Shwin. This episode 30, or yes, 30. Wow, we've made 30 episodes of this now. I am joined by first-time guest of the pod, of all of the pods. His name is Xavier Justin, XJ of Knicks Film School. XJ, how you doing?
What's up, Shwin? I'm doing great, man. Very happy to see all the Knicks accolades, my guys QG and IQ going off, doing well. So all's good for me. Yeah.
Good to hear. We will discuss that and much more. Before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has an Instagram, which you can follow on Instagram at thestrick.land. So please give us a follow. We are producing content on there and obviously would love to have as many followers as possible. We also have a YouTube where you may or may not be watching this podcast. If you are, hit like and then subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. It would be a massive help for us trying to get to 1,000. And obviously, there's a lot of content that goes on there as well. We have Dallas Amico producing analysis, X's and O's analysis. Prez occasionally will drop a banger. And then you have Sam and Tyrese who do the rundown after each game. So yes, please give us a follow on YouTube. We also have a Patreon which you can subscribe to. There are multiple tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the mailbag that comes out every other week, hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, aka the Doug Bag. You also get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to this pod right here, Strick and Roll, that I host, where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful weekly articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. This comes with a variety of additional benefits like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day. Whether you choose to subscribe or not, none of this would be possible without you. So without further ado, let's get started. The Knicks are, I think, like, they've been on this really insane, they've been a very streaky team all year, but they've especially been very streaky since they made the rotation changes. So I think this gets lost in it. And we're all guilty of it. That Dallas game was like the dumbest, stupidest game I've ever watched. I never want to talk about it again, even though I'm talking about it right now. And I want to say that look, since they've made the rotation changes, and I know there was a lot of controversy of like, oh my God, how are they not playing Reddish over Deuce McBride? And I know Deuce has shot like shit, but at the end of the day, since they've made the rotation changes that I think were good rotation changes, they're 10-5, and that's without Obi even playing for most of that stretch. That's with Brunson missing a bunch of time. That's with RJ missing a bunch of time now, and it's also a period where they kind of had, I mean, they haven't had, I remember looking back at this in December, but they basically play every other day until the All-Star break. Like, they don't have multiple days off. They have a few back-to-backs. Like, their schedule is brutal. I think they've done really well. And I'm not a huge Thibs supporter, but like, I'm not a huge Rand. Like, I've been really critical of Randle too, but like, I think what you have to say is that regardless of how you feel about the specifics of each player and individual involved in this, I think it's fair to say that collectively the decisions they have made, and I do think that the rotation changes that were made were not just a Thibs decision. I think they were an organizational decision. I think you have to say they're getting a lot out of each person, and I think it is worth mentioning, because I have to hold my hands up and say I was wrong too, is like the front office took a lot of heat for a variety of decisions they made in the offseason. I think the criticism was justified for various things, right? Whether or not you trade for Donovan Mitchell, keeping Thibs, keeping Randle, etc. Doing what they did to clear the space to sign Jalen Brunson. Like, these are all big time decisions and potentially controversial ones, and potentially ones that could have really backfired on them. I think they deserve credit for how things have played out so far. And, if you, like, I know Stefan Bondi, who is really just a very, very great, basketball mind. He had a great tweet last night because Donovan Mitchell scored 71 points. And when Donovan Mitchell plays well, Knicks fans have to be miserable about everything apparently. But he had some. He tweeted out basically, like, "Oh well, it's going to be hard for the Knicks trade to find somebody worth trading everything for, like Donovan Mitchell was." And I just think like if you zoom out again, regardless how you feel about Thibs, Randle, the Brunson, all these things, if you just zoom out, the Knicks are 20-18. They are playing one of the youngest rotations in the NBA, and they are developing their own young talent and winning basketball games. And like at the end, I don't know. Like for me as a fan, I've talked about this many times. Like all I've ever wanted the Knicks to do, and I know this probably like people like you like have higher standards, bro. But like all I wanted the Knicks to do is be competent and like play their young guys and develop them, and just do that for a few years and see what happens. Because like I will say this, like now that the Knicks are actually playing their young guys a lot, and not just playing them, but like putting them in prominent roles. Um, if there is a star that now comes available on the market, I would feel better about making a major risk in terms of loading up picks and whatever to send out for that star than I felt about it last summer. So I know I just said a lot of things there, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on kind of like the broad thought I laid out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you and I really agree on a lot. Kind of hearing you talk and hearing, seeing stuff on Twitter, I think we tend to agree a lot. I think the last point that you made was really critical, right? I think I totally agree that I would feel way more comfortable kind of going all in on sending picks out for a star at this point than I would have at the beginning of the season or before the season started. I was one of those guys that was cool with not dealing for Mitchell, given the asking price. I do think Bondi makes a great point, which is something I've heard him say before. It's like, if you didn't do this for Mitchell, you kind of got to do it for a better player. And who's that better player going to be? It's going to be tough to find somebody who comes available that's better than Donovan, especially obviously offensively. So it's tough. People talked about Levine a lot, and it's just like, that's a non-starter. Firstly, you don't want Levine. Secondly, what are you going to trade for him? Like, it doesn't make sense. And I think that the point of people talking about Levine is like, there's nobody out there that you're bringing in anytime soon. I don't know. A guy I would love is Booker. Is the Sun situation going to fall apart at some point? Who
Yeah,
knows?
I think the Booker thing is
Yeah,
like maybe after next season because
yeah,
Paul has that like weird contract where the last 2 years or whatever it is are non-guaranteed. So I
yeah.
think it's non-guaranteed after. So the 2024-25 season, that season of his contract is non-guaranteed. So they can basically get off his money then. But like, I mean, look, we watched that game yesterday against the Suns. I've never been a huge Chris Paul guy, but like, look, he's obviously been like a great player for a long time. Watching that was like this guy. Look, I love Immanuel Quickley more than anybody, and
Yeah.
I think he's a great defensive player that doesn't get the kudos he deserves for his play
Yes,
on that
sir.
end. But like I'm sorry, like even forget prime Chris Paul. Chris Paul 2 years ago, there's like maybe 3 or 4 guys in the entire league that you're talking about could just lock him up for an entire game. And yesterday, Quickley did that, and I didn't think Quickley was his effort level and compete level is always high, but it wasn't like I don't know. He never
His biggest
was.
effort. Yeah,
Yeah, he was never challenged by Paul. It was like it was just so
yeah.
easy for him, and I mean, it was genuinely stunning to watch this team. And then also like I don't know. I think fairly to some extent, the front office has been criticized for like being not making wholesale roster changes at certain points in time. I do think that like they've done a pretty decent job overall, but like there's some criticism warranted for that. Fine. You look at the Suns team, they won, they were 2 wins away from a championship in 2021, and they've done nothing with that roster since then. It's literally the same roster. Like the only move they made is basically trading a first round pick for Landry Shamet and signing like Jock Landale and Damian Lee. Like the team is the same. It's one of the most bizarre things I think I can remember. And if I was a Suns fan, I'd be furious. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the whole
No,
Paul thing and ever watching them yesterday was crazy to me.
no, I totally agree. It was like a shell of Chris Paul, and like you said, I mean, I felt the same way. Kind of seeing Quickly just completely lock him up. chase him around screens. Like there was a time when if you're behind Paul after a screen, you're done. You know, he's going to draw a foul on you. He's going to score on you. Like there's nothing you can do. He's going to throw a lob. Quickley was able to like chase him around screens, play to the side of him, you know, get deflections, really affect his shot, affect his passing lanes. And it was like easy, you know, like obviously I think IQ is an elite guard defender in the NBA. I think the statistics support that, but not to the extent that he can just dominate Chris Paul easily like that. So I totally agree. That's why I'm looking at the Sun situation. I don't think that situation is tenable. I think Mikal Bridges is slightly overrated. Also defensively, I don't think he's this elite perimeter lockdown defender that a lot of people think he is. Obviously, Crowder's going out. Ayton doesn't want to be there. You know, Chris Paul's getting old, as we talked about. That's the one situation that I look at and I can see something happening for Booker. But otherwise, I look around the NBA and I'm like, I don't see what the star trade is going to be in the next year, maybe two. So I love developing the youth, and that's what I've wanted for the whole time. I give the organization a lot of credit, you know, including Thibs this season for making some of the moves that I think a lot of us have been looking for. You know, relegating Fournier to the bench mostly. You know, Derrick Rose kind of just being towards the end. I don't know what to say about D Rose at this point, but you know, I love Miles McBride minutes. I don't care if he shoots, you know, whatever 25% until he gets his three-pointer back that we know he has, that we've seen evidence of in the G League. Like, I'm cool. I'll roll with it. You know, it's not super important to me that they capitalize on every minute. You know, I want to see the development. And the way I think about it is like, I look at them as like an 11-4 team in the last 15. I do not count the Dallas loss. That is like the flukiest thing that's ever happened. I mean, if I'm just going to count that as a win in terms of like my personal record book. So yeah, I think that the rotation changes have been excellent. I think that they've played out really well. I think that these guys are developing almost like the best you could have hoped for in terms of guys like Quentin Grimes and Immanuel Quickley. I can't wait till Toppin's back. Randle's playing out of his mind offensively. Do I think it's sustainable? It's tough. I've been diving over his stats to really get a sense of like, can he maintain this level? And it seems possible. So it's like 50-50 to me. But yeah, I really like the direction. I like how they're like infusing the youth with, you know, mainstay guys like Brunson and Randle. And, you know, I think another guy that we haven't mentioned yet, Mitchell Robinson, has been playing exceptional. He might be the MVP of the team at this point, like in the minutes that he plays. His defense has been unbelievable, and his impact on, you know, the offensive end is completely undersold in terms of his offensive rebounding ability. Like, it's magical to watch him get offensive rebounds. So yeah, I really don't have many complaints for the immediate status of the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think look, the Mitch piece, I've been like really up and down on Mitch, kind of mirroring like Mitch's up and downness in his career. But like last year was really disappointing for me. Like, I understand he had the injury and rehab. I would guarantee, and Randle mentioned something yesterday after the game where he talked about like how he felt like Mitch is being really much more serious this year, and like he had come worked out with him in Dallas and all this kind of stuff. I would bet that if you gave Mitchell Robinson truth serum, he would tell you that he did not rehab the best he could have coming into last season. He was notably overweight. He was fat. Like he actually made a joke about it, and then they pulled that clip from their channel at the start of last season. It was like a funny thing, but the point is like, and then you know he plays himself into shape, which took about like 2 months. And if you go back and look at last year, like mid-January ish is when he really started to like put it together. But even then, like he was very streaky. He was very, very up and down. And it wasn't just like, oh, well, he's streaky in terms of his offensive rebounding. It was like, no, like there were games where he was not locked in defensively, even once he was back in shape. And then you compare that to and I thought at the start of this season, he wasn't locked in necessarily either. But like you look over probably the last, I want to say 30 games or so, which is most of the season, obviously, he's been great. I mean, he's been as serious, locked in, whatever you want to call it, as he has been his entire career. This is the best stretch. It's not a stretch anymore. This is like if this is the new level of Mitch, then not only did the Knicks make the right decision in keeping him, but that's a descending contract that he's locked into for the next 3 years after this one. It's probably one of the best value contracts in the league. And again, like I was, you can find it. I have tweets after they signed that I was like, I wish it would have been 3 years instead of 4. I said last year that I would have rather overpaid to keep the contract short term than give him a fourth year. And I'm glad to say that I was wrong apparently because he's playing fucking great. And I want to, you mentioned like what star trades are there for the next, we don't know. Well, the one thing that is always true in the NBA is we never know. We never know. Guys come available all the time that you never know. And I think uh I have pretty decent insight that like the Knicks and most teams around the NBA did not Danny Ainge jumped the gun. Like Mitchell was not supposed to be traded last summer. He was supposed to be traded this upcoming summer. And that obviously changes the calculus for a number of teams around the league. Obviously, Cleveland made the decision that it was their time to go all in. I think that was the right decision for them. Obviously, it looks like they hit a fucking home run. And to be fair, like it looks like Utah did really fucking well in that trade too. So, that's one thing to consider. But like, who is the next guy? I don't know. Booker, I think you're right. I mean, one as a fit, and this is the part that I think is really critical when you're talking about star trades. The reason why I'm still like very okay, even with you know, uh, the benefit of hindsight, is that if you made like I still don't love the fit of Mitchell and Brunson as your long-term backcourt pairing. I don't like having him, Brunson and Randle, not because they're not all good players of varying degrees, but I think that's like when you have your three best guys, you want them to be able to complement each other on both ends of the floor, and I don't think those three complement each other defensively. Um, is the mid three, as we call it, is that the most complementary fit possible? No, I don't necessarily think so. But you also aren't risking a lot to assemble this, right? Like they haven't traded out picks to put this together. All they've done is really given these guys $100 million contracts, which at the end of the day, if you look at the NBA, $100 million is a lot of money, but it's also not big time money in the NBA. So like they've put this thing together, but it's really important that when you trade for a star, that star be the right star. And the reason I think Booker makes sense is like if you just look at this team's roster construction, it is still crying out for a star wing, especially a star wing scorer. And like, one of the things I like about Brunson, and I think what makes him valuable, I know he's had some end game foibles, but like what I think makes him valuable as a half court, gotta have it bucket getter is he's a true 3 level scorer. And he's now really taking pull up threes, but his mid range game is so good. And that's really the thing that I think makes him viable as a playoff scorer. And that's the best thing about Devin Booker's game. That Devin Booker is one of the premier mid-range pull-up jump shooters in the NBA. And it's why I think he's been very good in the playoffs through his career. Or I mean, he's only made 2 playoffs, but like in those 2 playoffs, he's performed very well. So like he is, when you talk about ideal fit, is he a top 15 guy? Is he top 10? I don't know where you want to rank him. I think he's a true star. I will say that. And like I think just as a fit, he is perfect. But then you like look at other guys that might shake free, right? Is SGA before we got Brunson? No doubt about it. Would have loved him. I don't know if I like the fit between him and Brunson. And okay, are you going to replace Brunson with SGA? Let's assume that Leon Rose isn't Jalen Brunson's godfather. Like, even if you were willing to do that, how much better is that making you? How much further is that pushing your ceiling? I don't know. I do think it makes you better because I do think SGA is a better player, but like how much so? I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. Trae Young, please fuck no. Like absolutely don't want anything to do with that guy. Total loser. And I think if you want to like I was actually talking about this with somebody the other day, but like in a vacuum, if you told me that Trae Young is a better basketball player than Jalen Brunson, I agree. If you're talking about 5-on-5 NBA basketball, how to build a contending roster, who is easier to build a contending roster with, around, however you want to phrase it, I think it's Brunson, like without question, because he has off-ball utility, and he's not a good defender, but he's a fucking try-hard defender for sure. He competes. Trae Young doesn't compete. I mean, I don't know if you watched the end of their game yesterday, but like the amount of idiotic plays this guy makes at the end of games is so frustrating. It's not surprising to me that there's now all these leaks from Atlanta, which look, there's not a lot of. I heard Ryan Russillo say this, and I think it's a good point. There's not a lot of anonymous quotes from teammates supporting Trae Young when any of these reports come out. So, like, I don't know. Is he a guy you really want to risk it all for? I don't think so. Cat, please no. Like, again, not a guy. I'm out on centers who can't play defense. That doesn't really make sense to me. But like the point is like it's got to be the right guy. It has to be the right guy. It's only worth it if it's the right guy. And like that's why I didn't care. Like when people are like they got to get DeJounte Murray, and I'm like DeJounte Murray's nice. He's a good player, but like he was people are like he's an all-star. Okay, can we be real? Like he was a replacement all-star. He got the D'Lo all-star. Like let's calm down. He's a good player, but like was he worth what the Hawks gave up to get him? I don't think so. And it doesn't look like it right now. And like the Mitchell one is a little bit more nebulous. So I won't kill people that like, if you thought they should have matched the price and you still feel that way, I think that's a reasonable stance to have. But I also think it's reasonable to look at the Knicks situation and be like, it wasn't and still isn't the right move because he's not the right guy to go for. And like, is it different if they knew before they did the Brunson stuff that Mitchell was going to be available? I think it might be different. I think they might have been like, fuck it, let's go get Mitchell and Brunson can re-sign in Dallas. Like, I don't know. But I think there's just so many moving parts. But you're right. Like the star trade part of it is it's going to happen at some point. They're going to do it at some point. It's got to be the right guy. And like, to your point about, we'll talk about quickly, but like Grimes, I mean, Grimes has shown a lot. He's flashed a lot. I'm curious to see what this guy can do in opportunities where he gets more usage. We saw a mixed bag, right? He was great against Dallas. He was real shaky against San Antonio. And he was good against Houston. Not going to say great. Not going to say, he was good. Mixed bag. Does he have that mental makeup to have 5 for 20 shooting nights and still keep putting up shots? That's part of being one of your a high usage primary creator. Obviously, the other part is being efficient at it. But like, does he have that? I don't know, but I'm curious to see, and I'm excited that we are now getting those opportunities with him and with Quickley. And hopefully when Obi comes back, we will do more with him than park him in the corner and tell him to space the floor. But yeah, like I just, it has to be the right guy. That's the one thing. And like, you mentioned Levine, like I don't like, I'm not trading RJ or Grimes to get Levine. And then I'm also not interested in benching either of them for Zach Levine. So like, what am I doing with that? He's not at that level to me. Booker would be at that level, but like, he's not going to that's not going to happen for at least, I don't think, until like maybe 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with everything you said. So I don't see any stars. I think that the issue with the Mitchell thing is like, it's good to pass on it, but it's conditional on what they do after. So I'm cool with passing on it as long as they don't make some kind of panic trade and trade for a guy like Levine and give up comparable value that they would have given up for Mitchell. If you couple and compound those two things, then it was a terrible idea to pass on Mitchell.
Right.
If you can bide your time and say, we're going to develop these young guys, we're going to re-sign some of them to solid contracts, we're going to develop those guys, they're going to play a ton of minutes, get a lot of the experience that I think a guy like Grimes is getting right now, where you see him kind of make some mistakes in the clutch and kind of, have some boneheaded things go on and be a little, you could see him get a little tight at the end. Like, I think that's a growing pain to me. So like, I'm cool with having that experience right now. And I think you have to let these guys have those experiences if you're not going to move them out. If you're not going to ship them out, they need to have those experiences. So I think it depends. I think I was a little surprised that the front office didn't do it. To be honest, like hearing some of the reporting after, I think they wanted to. And I think if Ainge would have came back to them and said, hey, here's the Cleveland offer on the table. Can you just give us a little bit more to beat this? And it's all you. I would have been surprised if they said still like, no, we're not going to do it. We're out. I think they might have done it. So because I don't see this front office as like being willing to wait like 2 more years. I don't know about you, but I think 2 more years is like too much for them and might be too much for Dolan. I really don't know. So
I think it depends
Yeah,
on.
you can respond to that.
Yeah, no, I think it just depends on how the current development roster, all that stuff works out. Like,
Yeah,
because I think that they need to make the playoffs, play in whatever this year. Like, I'll put it this way: if they finish 43-39, they're going to be a play-in team. If they don't make, at least they, at the minimum, they'd be a play-in team. If they don't make the playoffs out of that, I still think they'd be safe, and I would be fine with that. I don't think
yeah,
that would be like a disappointing season, especially given the way they're deploying the roster now. Now, if they were still playing Fournier and Rose a bunch of minutes, like, and they went 43-39, made the play-in and missed the playoffs, that to me is that I would fire them. But
yeah,
like the way they're doing it now is very different to me, so that matters. I think Dolan would be okay with that too. I obviously have no idea, but like I feel like he just doesn't want to see this team like, there were stretches early in the season where you're like giving up 145 to OKC, right? You're like, what the fuck is going on? Those are the things that I think probably piss him off more than anything, where you have these like zero effort defensive performances, and you just get destroyed at home. So I feel like he'd be fine with that, and ultimately, what you're betting on and what the front office would have to weigh is like, do we think that the internal potential for improvement with the guys we have is enough to to push our team forward next season without major roster changes? And one reason I really hope this team stays patient. I really do, because I'm not a draft guy, but all the draft people love this draft, specifically the wings in this upcoming draft, which is like the one thing that the Knicks very, very much need to address this offseason is wing depth. Um, and like they have 2 first round picks in this draft, and I know they're not going to be high first, but like this draft is loaded and you can get good wings, and we've seen the Knicks do this, right? The Knicks have drafted well in the late first and shit like that. Like they've gotten good value in areas of the draft where you don't always expect that. Like, we're talking about Quickley and Grimes, like those guys were both 25th picks. They're fucking home run picks at the 25. You're talking about Jericho Sims was the 58th pick. Like he's a legit, like he's a legit 15-minute a night guy rotation player at this point in his second year in the NBA. So they've gotten really good value in areas of the draft, and they've also shown a willingness and ability to move around and accrue future capital while doing it. So like, I really hope they are able to get to where they need to feel comfortable slow rolling it a little bit, because like you mentioned, like I mean, RJ's 22. We didn't even talk about RJ. RJ's 22. Quickley's 23. Grimes is 22.
he's
Like,
22. Yeah,
yeah, like these guys are still babies, really. Like, I mean, they're not super young, but they're still at the point in their career where, like, you're talking about guys that are 4 or 5 years from their prime. So they're still developing. Mitch is still developing. Like, that's why he took a leap this year. So you're in a position where, like, you don't need to rush this. And like, really, you should. Once you didn't make the Mitchell trade, you almost need to be willing to be patient, because it's important to get the right guy. And if if Levine is the star that's on the market, like you have to be willing to walk away from that, because that's not really pushing you. That's not gonna that doesn't unlock some championship upside for you. And like the entire point ultimately is to be a contender. So what the Knicks need to do is just wait for the right guy to come available, and not be beholden by like perceived timelines that need to be hit, right? Like, oh my God, we've been here for 3 years. We got to trade for a star. They have to be able to resist that temptation. But you're right. Like, it's if you don't trade for Mitchell, that's the main concern. And if you go back then and like trade it all for Trey Younger, like, to pair him with Brunson or like Levine, and it's like, what are you doing with that?
yeah.
That's the concern.
They definitely won't do that. I mean, especially not Trey Young. Trey Young, I agree with your assessment on Trey Young. I think the other issue with him, besides the off the court stuff, is that Trae Young is not just a player; he's also a system. Like when you get Trae Young, you are committing to a specific style of offense, a specific style of defense too, because he's a complete liability. So you don't just trade for a guy; you're trading for a system. You're overhauling your system to completely match his strengths and his skill sets. Don't think he can play with Brunson at all. I think that's a non-option. I think the Levine is a non-option. My whole issue is like, yes, I agree with you. What you're saying is completely rational. You need to be patient. You need to wait for the right guy, the guy that fits, the pieces that you're building, that fits on both ends of the court. Totally agree with that. The issue is that these are humans, imperfect humans that we're talking about. We're talking about Dolan, who knows what he's thinking from moment to moment. I don't know if he's going to be willing to just say like, yeah, we'll just keep building it this way. And, maybe in 2025 or 2026, maybe that's when the right star will come off. I don't know if he's willing to do that. I don't know if he's willing to wait for some guys that are in the rookie class this year to become, like SGA, like really leap into their prime and then grab one of those guys. Like, I have no idea. And I think it's a realistic issue that they may get impatient as a result of just like, are these guys going to get extended? Is Leon Rose going to get a new contract? Is Thibs going to get extended as head coach if we're a 42-win team this year and a 44-win team next year? Like, what's going to happen with these guys at that point? There's going to be an issue. It's going to be a thing when real decisions need to get made, and I just don't know how they're going to react to it. In a vacuum, I totally agree with you, and I think that's the right approach. I want them to take that approach. Do I think they will? I really question it.
Yeah, I'm very apprehensive too. I mean, some of the Quickley stuff that was coming out at the start of the year, which one, I think it was a little bit, I thought the way it was framed was kind of, let's just say, a little bit disingenuous. But obviously, like, look, like, I love Quickley. He's not, I mean, there's like, what, 3 guys in the NBA that are actually untradeable. It's reasonable to, like, if a team calls you up, that you're not going to be like, no, we're not going to talk about Immanuel Quickley. If you don't do that, you're not doing your job. So I'll never criticize a front office for listening on guys. Like, unless you have Luka or Giannis or like, that's basically it. Like, I'm listening. I am listening. But yeah, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how patient they can be. I do think that, they have, they definitely seem to, like, loyalty is something they've talked about a lot, right? Like that's been part of like the branding of their this regime's like, build of the Knicks, whatever you want to call it. Randle and Brunson, and then bringing Rick Brunson on with Thibs, who is Leon's guy. It's like it's all like very, very loyalty, blah 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 blah. There's negatives to that, but there are also some positives. And I saw you tweeting about Randle. I think it was yesterday, maybe. But like, I think this is a very interesting conversation to me, and I don't know how to feel. This is how I feel about it. I think that this is not a this is a very much not a analytically oriented argument, but like, I think the Knicks have really good vibes right now. They have good vibes. They're on the same page. The team looks like they're even, like, the fact that they had that miserable Dallas game, and there really wasn't much, like, I don't know, there wasn't any like guys bitching at each other or, cryptic comments in the press or anything like that. Like, they stayed together through that. That was a really devastating loss, and like they again now seem like they're back on track. They have good vibes. Blah blah. They are playing their young guys, and they have good vibes. Randall's playing phenomenal right now. I'm very, very hesitant to change up that chemistry and all that kind of stuff mid-season. Now, is there a price point for Randall where if some team offered, like, whatever it is for him, that you should risk it? For sure, you should. Like, there are price points for anybody, but the odds are I don't think that price point is going to be hit for Julius, and I am okay with them not actively shopping Julius at this moment in time. Also, like, but he's not. I'm still open to trading him, and I think they need to be open to trading him. Like, if they're open to trading, Quickley or RJ or whatever, they should be open to trading Julius too. Like this team is not a contender. You have to still figure out what the optimal ways to open up avenues to hit that level are. And like for example, we know that unprotected picks are the main currency that front offices look for when getting stars or trading stars. And if you are in a situation where, like, let's say the Suns, look, we just played them, they were miserable. Let's say the Suns call you up and are like, fuck, we need to do something to, because otherwise Booker's going to want it in a couple years. They call you up and like, we'll give you our expiring contracts and 3 unprotected picks for Julius Randle. Like, I think you have to seriously consider that. Like, I really do. Like, I was, somebody asked yesterday in our Discord what the minimum price offered for Randle would be that you would consider trading him. And I think something like Cam Johnson and multiple for unprotected firsts, I mean, 2 or 3, whatever it is, I think you really need to consider that. I don't actually have a strong opinion on whether or not I would take it, but I really think anybody acting like it's a no-brainer one way or the other is a bit, you're doing too much. Like that's an offer you would need to consider and like have a serious discussion about as a front office. So I thought your tweet was good. I forgot the specifics of it, but you were basically saying like Julius is playing great, like, but we should still be considering trading him if you get value, because like one of the things, right, was the argument last summer was, well, they can't trade Julius and they're going to try to rehab his value. Okay, guess what? You rehabbed his value. He's fucking playing great. He's playing the best ball of his career. You know, his contract now looks like a steal again. This is fucking phenomenal. The hardest part, as you mentioned, though, is like, now do you want to trade him? Because the hardest part is to trade somebody when their value is actually at its high. And I think like it's funny, like I fucking hate Danny Ainge, but like Danny Ainge, that's what he did. He had the balls to be like, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, we're not going anywhere with these two guys because of reasons out of my control, really. They're at their peak value. It's just, let's just pull the trigger. Let's just do it. Will the Knicks would they be able to do that with Julius? I don't know. I don't think they would, actually, to be honest.
I don't think so. No. Yeah. I don't think so. I'm so glad you brought this topic. It's like the most interesting dynamic of the team to me right now. And I think it's like the place where most fans are split. And I'm really glad you brought the Danny Ainge point, because I think I'm more like a Danny Ainge than I am about like this front office, right? Like, so I totally agree. I think this is where I came out. Julius was playing really poorly last year, had terrible value. Like, to trade him, you probably would have to attach assets to get off of him.
Yeah, that was the reporting over the summer. Like
that was the reporting over the summer.
Yeah,
and they wouldn't do that. And I think that's totally fair. We're not going to trade this guy at his rock bottom value. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. I wouldn't do it as well. But when would you trade him? If you wouldn't trade him when his value is at his highest, and you could command, let's say, 2 or 3 unprotected, I would think like 2 unprotected, maybe a swap, and a guy like Cam Johnson. Like, this is where you and I disagree. That's a no-brainer to me. I'm doing that deal. Like, I'm not gonna pace around the office and talk to guys for a while. Like, I'm not asking for input from 8 different guys. Like, if I'm Rose, I'm like, done. I'll tell him about it later. Like, that is,
you're not gonna ask Wes what he thinks.
I'm not asking Wes what he thinks. I'm not. No. We're doing that deal. I'm pulling the trigger, because to me, it's like, my goal is to build a championship contender. That's my goal. Mm-hmm. And they've come up with a plan to do that. Their plan is to acquire 2 stars, 2-star players, and to build around them with excellent role players. That's a sound plan. I agree with it. The way to do that is to acquire the most valuable assets you can accumulate, so that you have enough of an inventory to trade for those 2-star players. Now, if I have a guy like Julius Randle, is he more value to me in, as a player himself, as a player asset, or as 2 unprotected first-round picks, a young, ascending, really good player, and maybe a pick swap, or as Julius Randle? Like, it's very clear where the value is. It's very clear what a front office that's looking to deal stars like Utah would want. They want unprotected picks. They don't even care about these protected picks that we tried. Those are like throw-ins, The unprotected picks are the currency right now. And if you can get those for a guy that you had just last year, was a guy who you would have had to attach assets to move on, like, I got to take that deal, because I don't know what's going to happen next year. I don't know if this Randle is sustainable. I've been racking my brain, diving into the data to try to figure it out. Like, can Randle play this way? for the next 2 or 3 years? I'm not sure about it, and I don't want to take the chance to find out, because if his value goes down again and you try to trade him, you might get back one pick for him. So I really need to capitalize on his value. I think what the argument that you made about vibes, honestly, is the strongest argument against it, because I think it's a genuinely good argument, because these guys are humans, right? Like, these guys are in the locker room. They're having a good time. They're playing well. They feel like they're on the up and up. They feel like they can compete. They feel like they're going to go to the playoffs. And then you completely just upend everything and move the best player on the team, who it seems like, regardless of what we think from the outside, everybody loves Randle in the locker room. Guys.
And to his credit, like, his attitude has been way better this year.
Way better.
He's shown like genuine leadership qualities. All his post-game quotes this year, like, I killed him last year, because anytime they would ask him about his struggles, he would turn it into like this team-wide thing. He'd be like, "Oh yeah, we got to be better. We got to," and I was like, "Fuck you! Like, what do you mean we got to be better? You got to be better."
Yeah.
But like, he's owned it this year, and he's actually, like, he got that ejection against Sacramento, and that was a total meltdown for him, and it could have cost us that game. His comments after, he just owned it. He said like that was not like he owned that entirely. He took the bullets that Brunson should have been taking after the Chicago game, and he was like, "It's on me. I got to get the rebound." And I was like, in my head, I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he's just like, he said something yet like about Mitch. He went out of his way yesterday in the post game, multiple times to not. And look, I think Brunson is. In my opinion, he's the best player on the team, and I do think he's the best guard we have, whatever you want to call it. But like, he went out of his way, and I'm sure he doesn't think this, but he went out of his way to equivocate Quickley with Brunson. Which, like, does he actually think Quickley is as good as Brunson? No, almost definitely not. But like, it's a positive spin for me, for him as a leader, to do that, and it shows an appreciation for a young guy who, like, when we were shorthanded, the guy played 51 fucking minutes against Dallas. He's the only guy that showed up in that San Antonio game to play defense. Like, he busted his ass for those 3 games with Brunson out, and like, it's a nice token of appreciation, unless you're Thibs apparently, for for Randle, the team leader, to do that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that was helpful context, because I agree with all of that. And I mean, honestly, a lot of people made fun of some of the stuff with Randle, with like the meditation beforehand and all that stuff, but
whatever works.
I think he's doing it, and I think it's working. I think it's actually working. It's helping his psyche, whether it's, placebo effect or not. Like, it's working for him. So I don't care. I really appreciate how Randle's been this year as a leader, and his play obviously has been excellent. He's a borderline all-star, potentially could make it. I need to look back and really evaluate, like, who are the guys getting in ahead of him, but he's close no matter what. But my whole point with Randle is just that you have to be able to move him. You have to be able to just, like, take the emotion out of it if you get a deal like that. Not for anything. I'm not saying just get rid of Randle, get him off the team. I'm saying if you get a deal like that, we're talking 2 unprotected, a swap, and a guy like Cam Johnson, you got to be able to do that. I don't care. Then at that point, the vibes don't matter to me, because the longer term success of the team is on the line, and you're really leaving a lot of value on the table if you don't take a deal like that. And that's too kind of myopic, in my opinion. Like, I'm a very future oriented guy, and that's just like my standpoint on it. So that's my point with Randle. Not that we just need to get rid of him, but that if you get a real great deal like that, I would do it in the middle of the season. I would just, like, take that hit in terms of whether it's team camaraderie or the performance of the team this year. I would accept that for the long-term value that you'd be building.